Hey guys, welcome back to Anthony's Tennis Hub. My name's Anthony Hirsch. Today I want to break down the draw for the 2024 Italian Open on the men's side. It's a 2-week Masters, another 2-week Masters off the back of the Madrid Open that just occurred, where Rublev got the title at the end of the day, beating FAA, Felix Auger-Aliassime. Very strange tournament with a lot of injuries occurring. That tournament itself took place a couple of weeks after Monte Carlo, which is also a 2-week Masters. Of course, Indian Wells and Miami happened both in March, which were both also 2-week Masters. So I have some concerns about having so many 2-week Masters back to back to back, kind of maybe taking a toll on some of the players. But that being said, at the end of the day, it was Rublev getting the win there. In Monte Carlo, it was Tsitsipas getting the win. It's probably not how a lot of people expected the clay swing to start, I think. I think a lot of people were expecting the names such as Sinner, who's really risen up this year as a top guy, winning the Australian Open, of course, or Alcaraz, or Djokovic, or Medvedev. But we've had a different start than a lot of people, I think, expected. That being said, of course, Rublev and Tsitsipas have been two of the best clay court players for the last few years, but it's going to be interesting to see how this tournament unfolds. Unfortunately, with their injuries in Madrid, Sinner and Alcaraz are out of the tournament. They have withdrawn. I'll give you some other withdrawals as well. Also, Murray withdrew, Wawrinka withdrew, Jera withdrew, Lehechka, Diaz Acosta, and Artur Kazau, who's a very talented youngster as well. Hopefully all of those players get healthy, are able to play again soon. But Alcaraz and Sinner are big holes in the tournament. There's no doubt about that. Always flashy, always fun to watch, but also two of the best players in the world. Absolutely. Crowds line up for them. So it's definitely a big hit on the tournament, but I think it's going to be interesting anyway. Djokovic is in here. He's won this tournament 6 times. So that's also a very big player to have in the event. Other players that you have in here, you have Medvedev trying to defend his title. He's never done it. He's never defended a title before. How funny and ironic would it be if this is the first title that he could defend? That would be unbelievable, because he's not known to be a big clay courter. Most wouldn't say the chances are very high, but like I said, this draw is open. Zverev is the 3rd seed. He's not really been in great form at all recently. Then the other seeds you have in here, you've got Zverev, you've got Rublev, you've got Ruud, Tsitsipas, Hurkacz. Those are some of the other players playing in the event. Zverev is the other kind of top guy playing in this event that a lot of people would look at as a title contender, but he just hasn't been in very good form. In Madrid, he lost to Francisco Cerundolo 6-3, 6-4. In Munich, he lost to Christian Garin, and what was really a pretty poor match for Zverev standards. I just feel like Zverev, I'm not as certain. That being said, he's of course had great success here in the past. He's beaten Djokovic here, and one of the first times that he played this tournament, he beat Djokovic in the final in straight sets. So Zverev has seen great success in these conditions, but he's just not been in the best form. This could be, Medvedev played really well here last year. I wouldn't doubt Medvedev too much. I wouldn't count the guy out too much. That being said, it would be tough to see him have quite the run that he had last year, especially winning the semis and the finals in straight sets. It was really a one-of-a-kind run, but we'll see how Medvedev is able to perform anyway, even if he can't have back-to-back matches beating Tsitsipas and Rune in straights like that. He could still do some big things. So we'll see what all happens. But I'm going to go through each of the 4 quarters. I'm going to go over the seeds, the story of the quarter, matches of the quarter, dark horses, a quarterfinal. This is how I like to do the draws on Anthony's Tennis Hub. And also, after that, semifinals and finals as well. Please don't forget to subscribe if you are new, like always, to the channel. So without further ado, getting to quarter 1 seeds, I've got Djokovic, I've got Alejandro Tabilo, Francisco Cerundolo, Karin Khachanov, Ben Shelton, Adrian Mandarino, Jordan Thompson, and Casper Ruud. For my story of the quarter, I've got how does Djokovic look at an event he's had lots of success at before? Can he beat Ruud this time, potentially? So kind of two kind of storylines there, but how does Djokovic look? Going into Roland Garros, how does Djokovic look? Djokovic, if his name is in the quarter, in the section, he's going to be the storyline of the quarter. Especially at this point, he lost to Casper in Monte Carlo, so we could have another rematch here in the quarterfinals. But he like I said, he's had such great success here. He didn't play in Madrid. He withdrew out of Madrid. So it's gonna be interesting to see how it all lines out. And can he beat Ruud this time? So Ruud, in their last meeting, I thought his forehand looked as good as I've ever seen him hit that forehand. He was playing clutch. Djokovic actually won more points than Ruud did in their match. But Ruud won the points that mattered, and also Ruud's backhand was able to survive Djokovic and look as good as ever. So there were a lot of things Ruud was doing that were just really, really, really impressive. And actually, I'd say the backhand was even more of an important thing than the forehand, because the forehand is always good, but Ruud's backhand being able to survive against the Novak backhand, also be able to hit some backhand down the line winners and some crucial points as well, was a really, really big thing for Ruud in that match, and he did just enough to get it done and over the line. Djokovic and Monte Carlo, it's not his best event, but this event he's had much more success than Monte Carlo. He's won it triple the amount of times, 6-2. Especially recently, he's had more success here. He won in 2022. So we'll see how Djokovic does. It's going to be really interesting ahead of Roland Garros. Matches of the quarter, I've got Monfils versus Montero, round 1. I just think this is kind of an interesting matchup. Montero can play really well on clay courts, and he had a great win against Tsitsipas in the last Masters, and Monfils is always fun to watch, so I just want to give it a shout out because I have a feeling it's going to be quite a good match. Djokovic versus Ruud quarterfinal is really the kind of lone, absolutely must-watch popcorn match that I felt like I want to include in this one. Always with the matches of the quarter, I don't just include the round 1, round 2s, but I include potential matchups later in the draw in each quarter, especially if I feel like there's a good chance that we might get those. But yeah, Djokovic versus Ruud, this would be an incredible matchup. They actually played here in the semifinals a couple years ago, and Novak got his 1,000th win of his career in the semifinals, and Ruud said he was honored to be a part of his history, which I always kind of remembered. Both guys have seen a lot of success at that tournament. I mean, Casper Ruud as well. Ruud likes the conditions. They're not completely dissimilar to Roland Garros. They play much slower than Madrid. And Ruud likes that. It gives him a lot of time to hit the backhand and especially run around his backhand, which is a big help to him. He can't be, his serve, he doesn't have to be engaged in as much of who's the biggest server, because he's never going to be that. But yeah, he's reached 3 consecutive semifinals here, so he will have Djokovic in his way if he wants to get to a 4th consecutive. But those are a few things that I want to mention with the matches of the quarter. Dark horses, I've got Fabian Marozsan and Francisco Cerundolo. Marozsan in one of the craziest, most standout upsets, I think, in recent history against Alcaraz. He beat him here last year in straight sets. Okay, first of all, you don't beat Carlos Alcaraz when you're outside the top 100 in the world and you barely won a match at ATP level. Number 2, here's something else you don't do. You don't beat him in straight sets, ever, pretty much. Alcaraz just doesn't seem to lose in straight sets. It's a very rare occurrence for Alcaraz to lose in straights, and to do it in that fashion against a guy that I think most fans, even obsessive fans, had barely even heard of the guy, was a very, very surprising turn of events for that event and for Carlos. So I would just say shout out to Marozsan. I mean, he in the first couple of clay events for the season, he hasn't had incredible success, but I mean, in Miami, he took out Alex de Minaur in great fashion, gave him a breadstick, took out Holger Rune as well, 6-1, 6-1, if we remember that as well. He lost to Diaz Acosta in Barcelona, lost to Francisco Cerundolo in Madrid, which is not a bad loss. I actually quite favor Cerundolo on the surface. He's got a huge forehand. And so we'll see. We'll see coming into this event. He performed really well here last year. I think it'll give him some confidence, some good memories. And I would be interested to see how he does here, so not going to count him out. And also the man I just mentioned, Francisco Cerundolo as well. The Argentine, I think that he's somebody to look out for as well. I wouldn't be surprised if he goes on some big run as well, or at least has a couple of good wins on the surface. I mean, he's already performed well a couple times in Miami. He likes clay even more, so I wouldn't be surprised if he does something here. He was struggling to start the year out, but he's been doing a little bit better recently, especially in Madrid. Took out Tommy Paul, he took out Zverev in straight sets, lost to Fritz in 3 sets. So we'll see. We'll see what happens, but I just wanted to give those as dark horses. Also, I do want to say Cerundolo beat Jannik Sinner here last year. And so that's just something that I want to mention as well. So those are some of the dark horses. Marajan also just has an incredible Masters 1000 win rate, a great win rate at Masters 1000 level. He likes the big events, so that's something I'd mention as well. And then before I just get to my quarterfinal prediction, I also want to mention in this quarter that Menzik and Honkman are playing again. They played in the first round of Madrid, so I just thought it was funny that these two guys get paired up once again. Another good draw for Menzik, who's a very exciting youngster coming through the tour, and I'm excited to see him play on clay once again. He loves to slide. I think as he keeps playing on the surface, he's gonna show that this surface is one of his best. I'm predicting he did have to retire against FA in Madrid. Hopefully he doesn't have to do that in this tournament, because he's looking like a really exciting player. Took out Dimitrov in Madrid, so I just want to give him a shout out as well, and shout out to the fact that he's playing Hoffman for the second week in a row. But and without further ado, quarterfinal prediction for this first quarter, before I go on to quarter number 2, is Djokovic defeats Ruud in 2 sets. Novak gets the win in straight sets. He did beat Casper, like I said, a couple years ago in straight sets. This would be a revenge win. I think that Novak, like I said, just likes these conditions a whole lot more than Casper, not than Casper does, but then he does Monte Carlo conditions. And Casper's played a whole lot of tennis. He does get a little bit of a break because he lost to FA, I believe it was in the 4th round of Madrid. So that was a slight break for Ruud. But I don't know. This one, I won't be fully shocked if Ruud could pull out a second win in a row, but it's hard to beat Novak twice in a row. I'm going to give it to Djokovic in straight sets. I just think that Djokovic is Djokovic, and we shan't not forget who the man is that we're talking about, and I think that straight sets, I wouldn't be surprised either. Maybe it would be close straight sets, but I say straight sets for Djokovic. Quarter number 2, I've got the seeds are Alexander Zverev, Sasha Zverev, Navoni, Talon Griekspoor, Bublik, Fritz, Korda, Musetti, and Dimitrov. Storyline of the quarter, I've got Schwartzman plays his last Italian Open, which he qualified into. Also, Fognini, the ever eccentric and hilarious Italian, plays as a wild card. Who knows how many more times Fognini is going to play. Thought that deserved the shout out as well. Potentially hilarious encounter against Dan Evans, who they both have such boisterous personalities. So I just don't know. They're not afraid to say what's on their mind. And they're both very flashy players, so that could be a fun one too. But those are kind of my storyline. Schwartzman announced today, actually, that he is hanging up the racket at Buenos Aires come next year. This is one of his best events. He reached the final here in 2020, took out Rafa. Rafa won Roland Garros that year. I mean, Schwartzman can boast about a victory that very few can claim, especially with Rafa playing at a high level, but still Schwartzman being able to beat him. And that's a bit, it just shows Schwartzman's clay prowess. It shows his skill level. It shows how good of a fighter he is, losing to Rafa multiple times, but finally being able to take him out on his best surface, where Rafa's won double digits amount of time. So sad to see Schwartzman retire, because he's been one of my favorites. He's been one of my favorites to watch. A shorter guy on the tour, but one of the most talented, one of the best at switching directions and moving on a tennis court, and his lateral movement is phenomenal. The way he hits from the back of the court is ridiculous. One of the biggest talents, I think, and I think that he deserves a lot of credit, and also just a fun personality and a fun mentality on the court. So I would just give a shout out to Schwartzman for that. But he's playing his last Rome, and so that is my storyline of the quarter. We'll see how he does. You'll see though in my matches of the quarter here next. Potentially, he's got Zverev in the second round. That could be a really interesting matchup. He's got Vukic in the first round. Like I said, he did qualify in. So he's already won a couple of tough matches. He's got Vukic next, and then Zverev. Could be interesting. I wouldn't fully count out Schwartzman. I do think with the level recently, Zverev is going to be a big favorite, but also Zverev's not at his best. You never know. But that's definitely a matchup to watch because it could be Schwartzman's last time playing in Rome. And, one of his last times playing on a clay court, at a big clay court event. So that's always a big moment, especially right after announcing, that he's retiring within the next 52 weeks. So then my other matches of the quarter are Fritz versus Korda in round 3 and also Dimitrov versus Musetti in round 3. These are some of the most interesting to me right off the, bat when I'm looking at the draw. Obviously, these are not necessarily going to happen. These are just kind of matches that I think, if they do happen, which is quite likely, I think, they would be really interesting. Obviously, Musetti and Dimitrov, right off the bat, when you hear names like Lorenzo Musetti and Grigor Dimitrov, you're thinking two of the flashiest, most talented players on tour. Both hold a one-handed backhand, which is just such an aesthetically pleasing shot on a clay court. It's going to be great fun to watch. Two great athletes and two great talents go at it. Fritz versus Korda, two Americans on a clay court. This would be interesting because I feel like Korda, to me, has proven that he can play pretty well on a clay court, but Fritz recently, within the last couple of years, has shown that he can play well on clay too. And I mentioned it a couple times in the some of the Madrid videos where I actually predicted Fritz would make the semis, but obviously Madrid also does help because it plays a little bit quicker, a little bit more high altitude. It's a little bit more up his alley, especially with the high altitude. But that being said, I did think that Fritz, there are some things about Fritz, such as his improved defense and speed, especially on the clay court, that really make me like how he plays on clay, especially with the time that he gets to hit his backhand and his backhand defense, even though it wasn't there against Rublev in the semis. I feel like the extra time really helps him out so he can't be rushed. Because even when I'm watching Fritz play, I just feel like it just something about the way he hits his backhand too. I just feel like he can easily be rushed on that side, and he can. So with the extra time on clay, it helps him out a little bit. There are things about clay and grass that, especially with being rushed on the backhand, that just kind of go in either direction for him. There's some things that he plays out that grass really helps him out with. There's some things that are just not so good, as he doesn't have, at the moment, the net play that a lot of other guys on a grass court can hold to really be aggressive and finish off points, or the fact that people can rush his backhand on a grass court. So, but on clay court, even though the serve and the big forehand maybe aren't generally as effective, he does have a lot more time. And like in Monte Carlo last year, when he reached the semifinals and took Rublev to 3 sets, he shows that he can play pretty well on clay. He's a good athlete, underrated athlete in my opinion, and I think that he's somebody to watch. So Korda versus Fritz would be a really interesting matchup. I'm really interested by the state of American men's tennis right now, and who's going to be the next one to step up. Ben Shelton is a name that I think is probably shining brighter than most for most people in terms of potential. With all the names that are around, I think Ben Shelton shines a big light as he feels pretty reliable that he can do something. But that being said, I just think that I wouldn't count out a lot of these other guys as well, and I think the depth is exciting. It's definitely been a little bit quiet from the American standpoint recently, but also we had a point where we were reaching more semifinals with the American men. Although Shelton reached the semifinal of the U.S. Open last year, but let's see what all happens. I don't expect any of these guys to win Roland Garros from the American guys, but it will be interesting if we get this one, who will prove themselves to be the better clay courter at the moment between Fritz and Korda, or at least who will be able to win this one match. And it'll be interesting to see how the American men's tennis keeps going as the season keeps going. I think, in general, generalizing a little bit with all of these players on from the American men, but I think that we'll probably have a better chance on grass courts, on hard courts, especially on faster hard courts. But that being said, this could be interesting. Those are some of my matches of the quarter. Dark horses, I've got Sebastian Korda, I've got Greek Sport, and I've got Navoni. But that being said, everyone is a dark horse. Everyone is a dark horse. This is wide open. I think it's wide open. It feels like in this section, everyone is kind of a dark horse. And that goes back to Zverev not being quite at his best recently at all in his last couple of matches. He's been very vulnerable. He's been very, very vulnerable in a lot of different ways. I mean, his return of serve has just not been there whatsoever. And that's just not going to cut it on the clay court. He was winning like 25% of second serve return points against Christian Garin, and against Cerundolo just wasn't great either. Cerundolo was really able to dictate there a lot. So I just think that, I think that a lot of these guys, I don't know, I don't think any of these guys really strikes me as a guy who, I could absolutely see this guy getting to quarterfinal, semifinal, final. I don't know if there's a guy with that dangerous of a name in here, although Dimitrov is interesting, Korda is interesting, Musetti. But I kind of feel like this is wide open. I mean, Zverev is vulnerable, and it'll be interesting to see who gets through. But the three dark horses I wanted to name above anybody were the three that I named for Section 2, which is Greek Spore, and also Navoni, and also Korda. Navoni just won a challenger, which is the reason I bring him up, a 175. He took out Musetti in the final, so he's just running on confidence. Somebody to name. He's been doing well recently, going under the radar, good clay court player. Korda, some of the things I said, I really like him on clay courts. I really like Korda on all of the surfaces, but he's so skillful. He adapts so well to all of the surfaces. He's so good at rallying from the back of the court. He has a solid backhand, a solid forehand, very complete player, which is the same thing I feel about Talon Griekspoor as well, who had a good win over Holger Rune. So those are some of my biggest dark horses from this quarter. Quarterfinal, I've got Zverev defeats Korda in 3 sets. So I was surprised. I was surprised by what I looked up when I was looking up this head-to-head between Zverev and Korda. When I saw that I was going to pick Zverev and Korda to be the quarterfinal, they have never played. Zverev and Korda have never played each other. That's got to be one of the more surprising head-to-heads on the tour for guys that have never played each other before. Because Korda's been around a little while now, and Zverev definitely has. So I would have expected those guys to play, but they've never played. But while I look this up, just a fun fact real quick before I give what my talk more about that prediction with the quarterfinal matchup. I did want to say real quick, Zverev and Korda, amazingly, against great odds, have never played, but I found that Peter Korda, Sebastian Korda's dad, and also Sasha's dad, Alexander Zverev Sr., they played once in 1987 in the final of a clay challenger in Budapest, the one time that they played. Zverev's dad was never that high up in the rankings. I think his career high ranking was number 175. And he was playing for Russia. But Korda won in 3 sets in a clay challenger in Budapest in 1987. Korda was a teenager at the time, Peter Korda, while Zverev Sr. was 37, almost 38. So I just thought that was a fun fact. 1987, their dads played once, but they never played themselves against one another. So I just thought that was a fun fact while I was looking it up, that their dads played, but they never played, and they played in the challenger, just a random challenger in 1987. So that also happened against great odds, but against great odds, they've never played. So I don't really know exactly what to expect from the matchup. I've got Zverev defeating Korda in 3 sets. I did say that I don't feel like Zverev's had great momentum coming in, but even last year when he was really trying to come back and was not in great form, he played well here last year. I remember he always shows up here well. It might be his second best Masters tournament. He always plays well here, Zverev. I'm trying to remember exactly in terms of win rate. I know Madrid is his highest, but I mean clay is always very high for Zverev, so it's his 3rd highest for win rate. Canada is also there, but he's only played Canada once since 2019, and he reached the 2nd round when he did. So I would say this is his 2nd best Masters event. He won here in 2017 on his 2nd appearance. Then he reached the final. Then he reached the semifinal in 2022. He reached the 4th round here last year. Reached the quarters in 2021. So he seems to always perform well here. That's why I give him a win over Korda. Korda to reach the quarterfinal would be big. Korda to reach the quarterfinal would be a big result. But the reason I say that is because I feel like it's a great draw. I really feel like it's a great draw. I did say I like Fritz on clay courts, but on these clay courts, not that much, to be honest. And it's much slower than Madrid. And I would definitely favor Korda over Fritz at the moment. Although Fritz coming off the semi, he'll be confident. But I just wanted to pick Korda for a good run because I feel like he's primed for one. And the other big thing about Korda is that he won the doubles event in Madrid last week. And if you just think about it for a minute, if you win the doubles tournament against some of the best players and athletes in the world, you go all the way, you're going to feel confident. You're going to feel confident in your tennis. And that's going to pay dividends in every point, and especially on the big points when it matters. That's going to pay dividends. And he's going to feel confident about his game. He's going to feel confident about taking his chances. He's going to be playing with a good rhythm, a good momentum, a good confidence, a good belief. And I think that'll translate from doubles to singles. And a lot of the players that I played in doubles, he'll probably play in singles again. So that's something I wanted to mention. I do like Korda on the clay court. Let's see if he proves me right. It would be against great odds, but I've got Korda with a quarterfinal run. Like he reached the Shanghai semis last year out of nowhere. It's a bit streaky, so let's see what Korda can do. But that's my result for the second quarter. Okay, second half of the draw. I'm going to try to speed up here a little bit. Going into quarter three, I've got seeds Tsitsipas, Nori, FAA, Dimonor, Humbert, Jari, Fils, and Rublev. Story of the quarter, Rublev, Tsitsipas are in here. Also, Felix Auger, Aliassime. Guys who have had big success in the Clay Masters so far. Who can prove themselves ahead of Roland Garros? I mentioned Felix, but Rublev and Tsitsipas honestly are the big names that are throwing themselves out to me. Although I do want to say Felix, the most impressed I was by his actual level, just by his level, was against Djokovic here 2 years ago in Rome, when he took Novak to 2 tiebreakers. I thought he played incredible clay court tennis. I know he pushed Rafa to 5 sets at Roland Garros, but to be honest, I kind of thought he played better here. I was really amazed. That whole year on clay courts, he was playing some of his best up until Madrid, which was probably the best clay court tennis he's ever played in his life. I would think that he would agree with that as well. But that said, I do think that Rublev and Tsitsipas are the guys that have proved themselves more consistently on a clay court. Their games fit a clay court better, especially Tsitsipas. And I think that those are the 2 guys more so to watch. And it's going to be interesting. Who can prove themselves ahead of Roland Garros? Matches of the quarter. I've got Tsitsipas, Struff, round 2. I've got Felix Auger-Aliassime, Dimonor, round 3. I've got a few here. I've got Rublev, Tsitsipas, quarterfinal, which is the likely one. But I've also got Rublev, Felix Auger-Aliassime, quarterfinal. I put Tsitsipas in parentheses because, like I said, I don't just do first rounds. I don't just do early rounds. I don't just do first and second rounds. I also do potential ones for round four, quarterfinal, or round 3, round 2, whatever. As long as there's potential. And if I pick one where the seed, the favorite to get to that point, isn't there, then I'll put the actual seed who's supposed to get to that match in the parentheses. So it's not supposed to be Felix, it's supposed to be Tsitsipas. But if Felix does get to the quarterfinals and plays Rublev, then that could be a really fun match as well. But Rublev Tsitsipas is the big quarterfinal that absolutely dictates this quarter for me. Like I said, this year's on the clay swing, it started differently. I feel like it's great. I spoke about this at the end of my last podcast when I was breaking down the Rublev-Fritz match, but in the semis of Madrid. But I feel like we now have a better depth, especially in the top 10, the top 20, than we've had for a while, honestly, where it feels like all of these guys are dangerous. All of these guys are dangerous, they're consistent, they're a little bit more reliable. They have a little bit more of a fear factor to them, where they're not so up and down, like Tsitsipas and Rune were, honestly, for the second half of last year. And those guys were in the bottom of the top 10. Now you go even to the bottom of the top 20, and guys are looking pretty scary. Whether it's Hugo Humbert, number 15, Tommy Paul, number 16, Karin Khachanov, who's number 18. I mean, even FA is now number 20. Baez, Bublik, Shelton, Fritz at number 13, Rune at number 12, Dimonor at number 11. Then you got Dimitrov, Tsitsipas, Ruud, Rublev, Zverev, and obviously the big four. The big four at the moment, which is not even close to what the big four really were, but they're still what we're labeling the big four. Small four. Let's go with small four. No, they're not the small four, but they're definitely not. They're not the dominance that Federer, Nadal, Murray, and Djokovic had, but still a very dominant 4 players that were absolutely dominant over last year. That's Djokovic, Sinner, Alcaraz, and Medvedev. But anyway, even outside of those 4 guys, we now have guys winning Masters and being really successful in earning titles, big titles, and winning big matches consistently. Like Dimitrov is a guy who now has a much bigger fear factor to his name when you play him. You know that he's at a very top tier level of play. Even in the clay swing, when he played an absolutely amazing match against Holger Rune, where he was up match points as well. So, I mean, all of these guys now, we're in a different part of the season than we were a couple weeks ago, a couple months ago. But I'd say even a couple weeks ago, or at least like a month or two ago, where it felt like outside of Sinner, Alcaraz, Medvedev, and Djokovic, it was hard to find a whole lot of guys that you're going to be reliably confident in that they were going to, they weren't that reliable to consistently make quarterfinals, semifinals, and be that big of a presence. But now they absolutely are. Rublev and Tsitsipas, Roland Garros could be an interesting event. And it would be really interesting to see in this quarter who of the two really makes themselves a problem. But here's what I will say as well, though. Rublev, really weird past results here. Really weird past results. He doesn't seem to love it like the other clay events. Not at all. It's been really weird kind of losses from him. Really weird. I think it's like 56% win rate at this tournament, which is really, really stark difference from Monte Carlo, for example, and from Madrid. In Madrid, Rublev's got a 79% win rate. I didn't even realize it was that good. His win helps. Also, he's only played the event 4 times, but the win that he just had in Madrid. He's got 65% win rate in Monte Carlo, 56% in Rome. He's played the event 4 times. Technically, he played the qualifying, apparently, in 2015, but he played his first main draw in 2020. Really weird results here, to be honest. I'll go over a few of them, just while I have this kind of opened up real quick. He lost to Yannick Hoffman last year, which is a really weird loss in the 4th round. Second round, in 2022, where he lost to Krajinovic, 6-2, 6-4. Krajinovic and Hoffman, this is Rublev we're talking about. Rublev, yeah, I know he just lost 4 consecutive matches before winning Madrid, which is so strange and strangely kind of just very weird to lose 4 matches in a row and then win Madrid anyway. But before that, Rublev was very consistent. He wasn't losing to a lot of guys outside of the top 20, 30, 40 in the world. Not very often. So, but before that, quarterfinals for Rublev. And he lost to Sonego. He had a decent result, got to the quarters, but then he lost to Sonego in 3 sets. And then I remember the one before that was weird too, in 2020, although really before he became quite the player he became, but to Hurkacz he lost in 3 sets, which isn't that bad of a loss, but still. Rublev on a clay court, I don't know. It's been a weird event. I couldn't get myself to really feel that confident in Rublev just due to those weird results in the past. So, I don't really know, but anyway. The match of the quarter, though, so Rublev-Tsitsipas quarterfinal, that could be one of the matchups. Also, Tsitsipas-Struff, round 2 could be quite good. Struff has had great results, just picked up a title in Munich, his first ATP title. But slower clay conditions, not going to serve him as well. We'll still see how he does. FA versus Demonor, round 3, could be really, really good. Felix is definitely going to be probably the more confident of the two coming off this final, but that could be an interesting one. I don't expect either of those guys to win the title, although Felix got surprisingly close in Madrid. And also Rublev FA potential quarterfinal as well, although it'll probably be Rublev versus Tsitsipas, or it could be. Like I said though, I still hesitate to pick Rublev due to his past results. Dark horses, I've got FA and Arnaldi. FA, obvious, I'm not even going to go over it very much, but he played really well. I thought he was cracking the forehand amazingly in the final against Rublev, and I went over that match, and I gave Felix a lot of his dues and flowers, so I'll link that above my head. That's my breakdown for the Madrid final. But yeah, he just reached the final, played a good event, played a great final against Rublev, or a good final against Rublev, and a great match against Ruud earlier in that event, despite how the draw, not by his own means or anything he could do about it, kind of fell apart, and a lot of players were getting injured. He had nothing to do with it. He still had a couple of great matches there. And he put himself into position. But yeah, anyway. Unfortunate circumstances surrounding that event, but a couple of good matches for him there. But also Matteo Arnaldi is another dark horse as well. I thought he played well here last year. He beat Schwartzman when I thought Schwartzman was playing well, and then he lost to Musetti, who was playing really well here last year as well. Musetti lost to Tsitsipas, who was the semifinalist here. But anyway, Matteo Arnaldi, a confident youngster, very, very good. He's got a great backhand, and I just love everything about kind of his game. He's so talented, so skillful, and I think there's very little that I see poking holes in his game. I see very few holes in his game, and I think that he's going to keep rising up, and I like him on a clay court. He's going to be playing in front of the home crowd, which is why, and maybe a surprising pick, I didn't know who to go with here. I thought through a few names because I really didn't have the feeling for Rublev. Even when Rublev won Monte Carlo last year, he had a poor performance in Rome. So I didn't really feel comfortable picking Rublev. So I went with Tsitsipas defeats Arnaldi in 2 sets. I went with Arnaldi. Arnaldi got close to having a really top run in Indian Wells, I believe it was, when I actually picked Arnaldi to get to the quarterfinals there too. I keep going high on Arnaldi, but a lot for the reasons I named. I think he's a very complete player, very skillful. He hit some crazy shots. And it was actually Miami. I picked him for the quarterfinals of Miami. He reached the 4th round, round 16. He did beat Alexander Bublik there. He took out Artur Fils. He beat Shapovalov. Tsitsipas didn't get through. Shapo beat Tsitsipas. He lost to Mahac in the round of 16. So he was rather close to reaching quarters there. I think he'll like these conditions even more on a clay court, especially playing in front of the home crowd. And I just think this is a great draw with Rublev. He's got Mahac though in the first round, so that could already be tough to get through. Then he's got Jarry, who hasn't really been performing very well recently, but is always tough on a clay court. Then Hugo Humbert. We'll see what happens. Some tough names, but they might be tougher than they seem. I don't think Hugo will like these super slow conditions that Rome offers. And we'll see what all happens. I did also want to mention Berrettini is in here as well. I kind of went over Berrettini in my head, but I didn't want to go with him because also just something not really... I didn't feel it with Berrettini. Also, Berrettini has a really strange stat in which he's 71% win rate at slams, 46% at Masters 1000. I don't know if there's a bigger disparity that exists. This is a really strange stat I found while looking over Berrettini, but he also hasn't performed that well in Rome, 58%. Berrettini, this is his first match in a month. He won a 175 Challenger like a month and a half ago, so hopefully he keeps coming back, but I didn't expect him to do much of anything here. But yeah, that is what I want to mention for that. I've got Tsitsipas defeating Arnaldi in 2 sets. Love Tsitsipas on a clay court. Very little to say. Love Tsitsipas in these conditions as well. And his cat and mouse is incredible. It's incredible how he dictates the court. His backhand looks great on a clay court as well. He has really difficult height for other players to deal with on the other side of the court, and I just think that a lot of people struggle when they play against Tsitsipas, and his serve performs really well on clay as well. So I just really like Tsitsipas on the clay court. It's his best, in my opinion. Quarter 4, before I get into my semifinal and final predictions, I've got Hurkacz, Echeverry, Baez, Runa, Paul Tiafoe, Alejandro Davidovich Fokina, and Medvedev trying to defend his title are the seeds. Storyline of the quarter. My story of the quarter is Medvedev's title defense is on. Good draw. Kind of a bit long storyline here. Runa is there. And Rafa too for maybe his last day in his ever successful Rome event. So basically Medvedev title defense, and he's got a good draw, but a couple interesting names there too. Let's look at Medvedev's draw here real quick in the 4th quarter. Because I really did look at this. I was like, oh, it's actually pretty good. Hurkacz, he just won a title, his first title on clay. But don't love him on clay. On grass, he's lethal. On hard court, at a hard court Masters, he's lethal. On clay, not as confident. There are some good clay quarters in here, Echeverry and Baez, but Medvedev just took out a few good clay quarters in his first couple rounds in Madrid, which he might like more, he might not. I don't think he would, actually, because he won here last year. You wouldn't expect these conditions to really favor Medvedev, but he won here. So there's not really that much you can say. His movement was phenomenal here last year. The way he was turning defense to offense and was able to do it successfully was unbelievable. He looked so zoned in. And Rune and Tsitsipas just didn't, especially Rune in the final, I felt like didn't step up, but Medvedev definitely did. So his movement really unlocked a big thing for him, and his defense to offense was really phenomenal due to him unlocking that movement. And even though the pace wasn't there, which can be so necessary for his game, he still managed to hit consistently deep, especially off the backhand. So Medvedev was really good here last year. And then I've got also in here Paul Tiafoe, who I just don't really love on clay, despite Paul being famously a Roland Garros Juniors champion. But anyway, he hasn't seen the success on clay in his professional career, and I mean he's kind of an all court kind of more aggressive player, so it'd be hard for me to imagine his style really fitting a clay court super well. ADF is interesting, but he hasn't been performing that well this year. So all of these guys outside of Rune, I could see not being big problems. But then there's a guy here who's not seeded, who's pretty good on clay. He's a pretty top player on clay. And his name is Rafael Nadal. He takes on Zuzu Bergs in the first round, Belgian player, 24 years old. Bergs always looks great when I see him, so high on Bergs, but Nadal should get through that first round, and then he could have Hurkacz, and that could be super interesting. Nadal, potentially his last ever Rome event. He's had remarkable success in Rome. He's had the dominance that Rafa's had here with Novak, really, is mind-boggling. It's literally mind-boggling. It's unbelievable. It's one of the craziest stats, I think, in the history of tennis. I really genuinely think so. From 2005 to, at least one of them, from 2005 to 2022, Nadal and Djokovic reached the final of every single Italian Open. Okay, that's something. That's the first thing. Second thing, only on 2 occasions did they not win the tournament in all of those years. 2017 and 2016, Murray and Zverev. They beat Djokovic in the final, both those years. Their dominance here, in terms of, I mean, that's just unbelievable. That's just ridiculous. And Djokovic, he beat Rafa in the final when he did win the event. Let me see. I'm trying to count this up now in real time. But he beat Rafa in the final on, I believe, 2 occasions. On 2 occasions. So Rafa's here has reached the final 12 times, and he's won the tournament 10 times. So Rafa's been an incredible player at this event. So Rafa's had absolutely wild results at this event, and listen, I would be the last guy to doubt him here. I think Rafa is one of the big guys to look out for. Absolutely. I mean, this is a farewell kind of run for Rafa. It very likely is his last time playing here. One of the most successful tournaments for any player ever. He didn't get to play Monte Carlo, where he won 11 times. He did get to play Barcelona, but this is a big event as well. I mean, Barcelona's a big event, but this is a Masters 1000. And we'll see how Rafa shows up here. And I think he's gonna be so motivated. He's already played himself into form with tournaments like Barcelona, with tournaments like Madrid. He's already been able to play himself into some form with some match play. He played really well. He beat the world number 11, Alex de Minaur. Wasn't in straight sets as well, I believe. In the last one, he beat Kachin, who was playing amazing in over 3 hours in an amazing match. Lehechka put on really an astonishing performance. Very complete performance against Rafa to take him out. Everybody was saying that Rafa, you need to play physical, take out Rafa. I didn't really think that was necessarily the case. But definitely Kachin playing a very physical match against him in the round before definitely took some energy out of Rafa. So Rafa will hope to not play that many long matches. But, I mean, Hurkacz in the second round, I could see him getting through that. Although it would be an interesting thing if Hurkacz could be the guy to beat Federer in his last ever Wimbledon match, and also Rafa in his last ever match at Rome. 2 of the most dominant kind of runs at tournaments ever. Federer at Wimbledon, Rafa at Rome. But I could see Rafa getting through that. I'm just saying, I have a decent feeling about Rafa. I feel like Rafa's motivated, and he's going to keep trying to play himself into form. I won't be fully shocked if he goes out to Hurkacz or anything like this, but I'm also I'm going to put myself out on the limb. I think he's going to have a good event here. I think Rafa's going to have a good event here. So, anyway, but Medvedev, I think he's got a good draw. Rune and Rafa are to watch out for, but his title defense is on. Played really well here last year. The matches of the quarter, I've got Medvedev, Rune in the quarterfinals, potentially. Got Nadal, Hurkacz in the second round, could be phenomenal. And these are just Rafa matches. Nadal, Echeverry in round 3, potentially, if Hurkacz does not beat Rafa. And also Nadal, Rune, round 4, again, if Hurkacz does not beat Rafa. Those are some of my popcorn matches. Basically, Rafa, everything Rafa, and also Medvedev versus Rune, if it is not going to be Rafa who gets to the who will play Medvedev in the quarterfinal. So that is kind of my thoughts on everything. Dark horses, I've got Nadal. Dark horses is Nadal. All caps, period. Don't count this guy out. I think the stamina is a big thing, but he's going to be confident once he gets to these courts. He's only getting better and better. He's had great success here. And that's what I would say. Also, Rune, I feel like he's struggling a little bit more. He's still, I just don't know which Holger Rune is gonna show up. I usually know which Jannik Sinner is gonna show up. Carlos Alcaraz a little bit less, but he's usually pretty good. So, and his win percentage is much higher than Rune's, so I can let it pass. With Holger, I just never know which version of Holger is gonna show up. And I think he's playing super aggressively, and that's not going to help that much at this court, which plays super, super slow. With a loss to Griekspoor, with a loss to Struff in 44 minutes in Munich, where he won the title twice. A little bit more concerned about Rune, and that's in Rafa's section, by the way. So a little bit concerned about Rune, who's also defending final here. He got to the final Monte Carlo, nearly won it. Rublev with a great comeback, and he nearly won the title here, got to final here, but he got much less close than he did in Monte Carlo. But anyways, defending finals, a little bit worried for Rune, and we'll see what happens. This is my quarterfinal. This is my quarterfinal pick. I couldn't believe it. I knew it was a crazy pick while I was doing it. Didn't know what to do. I thought it over. And this is what I went with. Medvedev defeats Nadal in 3 sets. Rafa gets to the quarterfinals. He gets through. I don't know if he beats Rune, but I have Rune not making the quarterfinals. And I have Rafa in here, and I've got Medvedev taking him out. This is what I went with. This is what I went with in my head. Part of it, first thing, the kind of, I guess, elephant in the room is Medvedev beating Nadal, not Nadal getting through. My thinking here was that Nadal got tired once he got to the 4th round in Madrid. So if Nadal gets to this point, and if Medvedev is playing at a high level enough to get to this point as well, Medvedev will be playing pretty well, and he played incredibly well here last year, and he can make the match really physical. Nadal would already be potentially quite tired, playing guys like a high level player like Hurkacz, playing clay quarters like Echeverry or Baez or even Rune. For example, those could be some physical matches, like they were against Kachin. And Medvedev can make it physical. He can also do a lot of things. He's very talented. He can do things that can hurt Rafa. So, head-to-head's not good for Medvedev-Rafa, but they've also played some weird matches, some unexpected, surprising matches, right? They've played some close ones. There's a match at the ATP Finals, one of the ones that Rafa won, where Medvedev was up 5-1 in match point. 5-1 in match point in the 3rd set, and Rafa came back and won. There's definitely some mental baggage. It's going to be tough, but Medvedev's fearless. I think Medvedev will believe in himself, and I think he can make it physical, and I think that can hurt Rafa in a late stage of the event. Now, both guys need to make it to this point. Medvedev, I hope, is healthy. Rafa is going to be interesting, but I do like this pick. I'm going to stick by it. Rafa having a quarterfinal run. I do like him in Rome. I am worried for Rune recently. And Medvedev, I just loved how he played last year. He's going to be motivated when he's defending a title. I know he hasn't defended a title, but he usually does fairly well, I think. For the most part, at least gets to the final or the semi or the quarters. And I do like his draw with Tiafoe, Paul, Fokina. I don't think he'll be tired for the Rafa match. If anything, I think Rafa will be tired if that is the matchup that we get. And I do worry for Rune, so I have Medvedev defeating Rafa in 3 sets. That's my pick to make that TED at least 5-2, not 6-1. So that is my pick there. Medvedev to world number 4, and in here I believe he's the second seed. So yeah, the second seed. Semifinals. I've got Djokovic defeat Zverev in 3 sets. Novak hasn't played Sasha on clay in 5 years, since 2019 Roland Garros. That's 5 years ago, and that's pretty crazy to me in itself. They played some pretty famous matches on clay, some big finals of Masters events. They play in the semis of Roland Garros, and this would be interesting. It would be an interesting matchup to watch. Zverev is capable of beating Djokovic. He's very capable of testing him out. You think of the Olympics in 2021. But that being said, Zverev hasn't been in great form. A lot of guys have been taking sets off of Djokovic. I did have Djokovic over Casper in 2 sets, but I did say Zverev takes a set off of Djokovic. I think Zverev just constantly takes sets off of Djokovic and makes life very tough for Novak. I think Zverev will definitely show up for that one. Absolutely. And if he's in the semis, he'll be in good form. And yeah, I've got Novak though getting through that one in 3 sets. I think that if he's able to beat Casper, and if he plays the level he usually plays, like in Rome, like he did 2 years ago when he won the title. He lost to Rune last year, but how he usually plays in Rome, and even last year he played well. Rune just played really well to come back in that one when I believe Novak was up a set in a break, or at least a set. I think that if Novak plays his best, he should win this one, and I've got him in 3 sets. Zverev is quite similar to Djokovic, but I think Djokovic just does a lot of things a little bit better, and Zverev is a great player, but I've got Djokovic winning in a tournament where he's won 6 times before, and Zverev has not been in great form. So Djokovic in 3 sets. And I've also got Tsitsipas defeating Medvedev in 2 sets in a direct rematch of a semifinal that happened here last year, and it was Medvedev who surprised a lot of people by winning in straight sets. I think Tsitsipas does the opposite, and he beats Medi here in straight sets, and maybe in 2 very close sets, like Medvedev beat Tsitsipas here last year. I think it'll be a direct reversal. I just like Tsitsipas more on clay courts. Last year was awesome for Medvedev, but it's going to be very hard to repeat, especially with the confidence in his last few events for Medvedev. Also, by the way, not getting over the finals line is going to make it harder on the mental side to really have that confidence and that kind of motivation, belief, I think, to keep getting to the latest stages if you start getting down on yourself and thinking you're not going to be able to pull it through anyway, especially if Djokovic is still in the draw. So that is something else I'd like to mention, especially on a clay court like this. But Medvedev did win here last year. It will be interesting. But, Tsitsipas, in his final of Monte Carlo against Ruud, he was serving and volleying a lot and doing that successfully. I know a lot of that was to do with Ruud's returning, but it's not completely dissimilar from Medvedev, especially on a court this slow. And I think there's a lot of things Tsitsipas can do to hurt Medvedev. And that's why I've got Tsitsipas in 2 sets. Final, Djokovic versus Tsitsipas is my final, just exactly as it was here 2 years ago. The exact final was here just like it was in 2022, where Novak won 6-0, 7-6. That is the only final, that's the only match that they played on clay court since their final in Roland Garros, where Tsitsipas famously led 2-0 before Djokovic came back. But since that Roland Garros final, Novak has won 11 of 12 sets that they've played. He's won all 10 of their matches that they've played. The only close one being a 3rd set breaker in Paris, 2022 semifinals. Djokovic won their last 10 meetings. The last time they played, though, a little while ago, Australian Open final was their last meeting. So this would be really interesting, different circumstances. Novak would be going for number 41 for his first one since Paris. But Tsitsipas, the last time he won was in Shanghai. And it wasn't last year. It was Shanghai in 2019, the last time they held it before last year. So, in the quarterfinals in 2019. So, that's 5 years ago. It's been a struggle for Tsitsipas. I don't think it's impossible. I'm not going to be that guy. It's maybe a little bit of a different Djokovic. I'm not sure. He's been struggling a little bit more, but I do have him at this point. I do have him playing into a little bit of form, and I do have Djokovic winning in 3 sets. I don't know if I don't think necessarily that this means that Djokovic is going to win number 4 in Paris necessarily. I'm not saying that I'm expecting Djokovic to win this and then wins Roland Garros and then wins Wimbledon and wins it. But, He's had great success in Rome, and I'm not going to say he won't. That's something I'm definitely not going to do with Djokovic. I'm not saying he will win Roland Garros and this. I'm not saying he won't. And Rome, Sinner and Alcaraz aren't there. Tsitsipas had great success against him. He likes these conditions. He's going to be motivated. And I think he can win Masters title number 41. And we'll see if he's able to. He really seems to like this Tsitsipas matchup at the moment. Tsitsipas can do very little to hurt Djokovic, but on a clay course, a little bit different. In 2022 Rome, I'm sure he still had a lot of the mental baggage from the Roland Garros encounter. I believe at that time that was the first time they had played. If I'm not mistaken, I might be mistaken, but one of the first times that they had played since the Roland Garros final. But either way, I have Tsitsipas taking a set, but I've got Novak finishing it off and getting another Masters, and it would be really interesting to see how the tournament pans out. I've already went a while here, breaking down the draw. But I appreciate everybody tuning in. Please don't forget to subscribe like you're new. Please don't forget to ring that notification bell as well to get notifications for more videos. And yeah, I appreciate you guys watching. I'll see you guys for the next one.